Hello, welcome to my channel. Welcome to my garage. My name's Alex. Behind me is my Volkswagen Golf R. I have the car with me today because I'm getting it ready to do some track days with, and I thought I would take you along with me and show you what I'm doing in order to get it situated and the process of basically going from this to the track. So I want to make sure that this car is 100% for this event, and what I mean by that is that all the maintenance on it is done, it has no mechanical issues, and it can pass the tech inspection for the event. The event itself is going to be at the Circuit of the Americas in the Austin, Texas area, and it's going to be hosted through Edge Addicts. So let's get started. I plan to start in the front and work my way back. The first thing I'd like to address is an oil leak coming from the cylinder head valve cover. I had first noticed this about 6 months ago when I was inspecting the spark plugs, and then during a more recent repair where I had replaced the water pump, I noticed that this leak had progressed and was starting to have oil coming down the back of the engine. So typically a valve cover gasket replacement on its own is not very eventful. However, with this motor, the valve cover doubles as the camshaft retainer. So it's a little bit more involved, and I think it might be worth showing. First off, I want to clear off all the stuff from the top, which is blocking my access to the cover here. I'm probably going to go ahead and remove this passenger side engine mount after supporting the motor from the bottom. Then I'll go ahead and get this cover off here and see what we got inside before proceeding. All right, here's my progress so far. So after going ahead and clearing off all the stuff on top, coil packs, got the harness off, and removing the PCV, which I have covered up right now to keep any debris out while I work. Yeah, got all the parts on the bench. I left this coolant line intact because I really don't want to drain coolant out since that's a system that I just serviced. It's all brand new coolant in there, so I prefer not to drain it and fill it again. Went ahead and removed that motor mount, lifted up the engine a little bit, which allowed me to access the upper timing cover, and then I went ahead and set the engine at top dead center, put it in a service position. Did have to remove the windshield wiper reservoir because that was totally in the way of the crankshaft pulley and just kind of in the way in general. So just got that out to make things easier. Okay, so not touching the coolant system at all did not quite pan out. Once I got the valve cover loose, it was clear that it was just way too tight in order to work there with those things still intact. But luckily I was able to drain down the coolant system very easily by loosening this connection here, and just I had a jug here to catch the coolant. So this is all that had to come out. After that, I was able to go ahead and loosen this hose that I can now put to the side, as well as this one here that I can take out. So now we are clear to remove the valve cover. But I do want to mention that one thing that I originally did not see is that the vacuum pump slash the high pressure fuel pump, they attach around the valve cover here, as well as having a bolt go through into the valve cover. So I had to loosen those and pull this back. So now we should be able to remove this valve cover. With that valve cover out of the way, I immediately went in and inspected my valvetrain, and so far everything looks good to me. I took a look at the gasket area as well. Can definitely see that there's oil in this spark plug hole number 1 as well as number 4. So that's no surprise. That's how I originally noticed the issue. But yeah, all of the cam lobes look good. I checked them all out. I don't see anywhere. I don't feel anything on there. All of the followers look good. I don't see any, not noticing anything with any of the valve springs. No broken ones, nothing like that, which doesn't really surprise me. The car runs great, sounds great. But check out this valve train. You have not only 2 cam phasers controlling timing advance retard, but on the exhaust side, you also have variable lift and variable duration. If you take a look, this is a good example. You can see that this right here is the low lift lobe. And not only do you get more lift with this one when you switch over to the high lift lobe, but you can see it also starts earlier. That's why you have that step there. So you actually get longer duration on there, which is pretty cool. Another thing I did was flip this valve cover right over and make sure everything looks good, which Not much going on with it, but I did go ahead and check out these cam adjusters, each one of them. I guess they're supposed to be at rest in the retracted position, so I checked them all. All these look good, but these are the actual things that actuate that camshaft. So yeah, if we look real quick, I'm just pointing this out again just because I think this is so interesting. So when one of those things pushes forward, it actually locks in to this channel, which you can see isn't straight. So it actually guides this around it, and it kind of spirals around, and then pretty much kind of resets and keeps going here. But yeah, it's like continuously moving this cam lobe side to side when it's running. I think that's pretty crazy that all that can happen at like 6,000, 7,000 RPM with this motor and not, sound crazy and all make all kinds of noise. So thought that was pretty cool. So this is that top timing cover I took off, and this is where the cam magnets sit inside of. So of course got those seals, two of those. And then I actually didn't realize that there are O-rings inside the bridge, because when I looked them up on the parts website where I was buying them from, it actually doesn't show this as a match on there, but I was able to confirm these with like VWparts.com or something like that and get these at the local dealer. So this is a 52 millimeter by 3 millimeter O-ring. And also I have this, which is the gasket for the vacuum pump, since I had to pull that off. This is the seal around that. And as far as the valve cover gasket itself, it is a some sort of anaerobic sealant, and I'm going to go ahead and use this Rainzo seal that I've been using for a little while, and it's worked really great on everything I've put it on so far. Up to this point, I've been spending my time cleaning up gasket material. So I went ahead and started off with the cylinder head cover and then moved on to the cylinder head. Just being very gentle with the surface here. This is a machine surface because the cover is actually retaining the camshafts. So you have bearing clearances, journal clearances here that need to be maintained. I was trying to be really careful to keep debris out of the engine. I had plastic here actually covering the camshafts, and I would kind of pick a section at a time and scrape from inside out. Then I was using this to not only keep gasket material off the engine here, but just give me something to wipe the, when I was using the razor blade to wipe the razor blade. I had to use it a few times for some of these thicker spots, just very carefully. Most of this came off with Scotch-Brite with light to medium pressure, which was nice. That worked really well. Scotch-Brite and carb cleaner. Sadly, that cleaning process was a waste of time at this point. There's substantial tension coming from the timing chain, which was lifting the camshafts up on the driver's side. In my mind, I couldn't justify proceeding like this and using the valve cover in order to push this back down while tightening. I have seen people take this approach when doing this job, but it's not for me, so I'm going to take another route. Ultimately, what I did was releasing that timing chain and removing the camshaft bracket. Additionally, going even a bit further and removing the camshaft out of the cylinder head as well as the rockers. This gave me a chance to really go in depth and inspect all the components instead of just looking in through the top. I was able to check every single one of the followers, look at all the lifters, and check out all the springs up close. Additionally, I also discovered that even with the precautions I took, a lot of debris from the gasket material and my cleaning materials still got down into the cylinder head. So with the camshafts and the valve train components removed, it made it possible for me to go through and actually clean a lot of that up. Additionally, I went through and did another round of cleaning on the gasket sealing surface, which was very easy to do with the camshafts out of the way. I also noticed that some of the gasket had fallen into one of the journals, which I wouldn't have seen if I had not removed the camshaft. So the process involved loosely reinstalling the cylinder head valve cover and installing a few bolts finger tight to retain it. Then going through and removing the camshaft bracket, which first required the removal of the oil control valves, which are screwed into the front. Then loosening up the bracket itself and sliding it off.
This is the reason why I reinstalled the valve cover in order to retain the cams and prevent the timing chain from yanking them down. With the camshaft bracket out of the way, the cylinder head bolts at the front were exposed, and I was able to go ahead and install a tool, allowing me to push the timing chain tensioner back and installing a retention clip which would hold it in place. With the chain now loose, I began preparing to remove the cams from the cylinder head, first by pulling the slack out of the chain and using a pair of clamps in order to secure the chain against the chain guides. I then used a paint pen in order to put location marks on the sprocket where it meets the timing chain. After that, I was able to go ahead, lift the cams out of the cylinder head. I also removed the followers and brought everything over to the bench.
After pulling out those cams, I went through here and cleaned everything that I could see to the best of my abilities, checking everything over as I go. I cleaned up the camshafts and followers separately on the bench, and then now what I'm going to do is, since I've been cleaning parts, I'm going to go ahead and add oil to all the contact points, meaning the top of the valves as well as the top of the lifters there. And I'm going to do the same treatment on the cams and the followers as well. I might just dip the followers in oil for a second each, and then as I'm placing the camshaft down, I'm going to go ahead and oil all the journals here as well as on the camshaft side. Before I start putting things back down on the gasket area in order to make sure it's going to be ready for sealing. At this point, I've got the final cleanup on everything, engine and the valve cover side. I've got everything lubricated. I've got my sealant applied, which I decided to make a change kind of at the last minute. So I did say at the start that I was going to use the sealant here, Reassembly, but I did decide to go with a anaerobic gasket maker, which I already had sitting here, and this would be similar to what it gets from the factory. After doing some research on it, the reason I went with this one is because this is a more rigid sealant, and since this part here is a camshaft retainer, it seems like it would be the better choice to have less potential for movement. I know it's held in place by the machine surface itself, but there will still likely be some gap even in the metal contacting points, and I think a rigid dried sealant would be better here than a flexible one, which is what the Reassembly is. Now, I do think that this one would perform better in terms of sealing oil out. However, my primary concern here is functionality and durability, and oil leaks are secondary. So I'm going to go ahead with this. So yeah, now I'm going to go ahead and put this onto the car and begin assembly, tightening the bolts. I've got the valve cover and all my bolts in place at this moment, so now I'm beginning to go through for the tightening sequence. The way it goes is going through in several stages by hand tight to get it hand tight, then 8 Newton meters from the front. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the way that you go. So it's basically working inside out, and there's no specification for which ones to do, but I like to go inside out on each column or row of bolts as well. So that's what I'm going to do now. At this point, I've finished step 2 of tightening the valve cover bolts, and I'm getting ready for step 3, which is the 90 degrees torque to yield step. Before I get started, I've taken some extra precaution in order to make sure that I don't screw up during the process, and if I do, I can kind of find my way. In case I lose my focus here, so I've done 2 things. I've, number 1, numbered the order of the rows that I'm going to follow for tightening. So again, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then there's no specific order for tightening the bolts within this row, so I'm going from inside out, going 1, 2, 3, 4. And on each bolt, I've put a Sharpie mark at the 3 o'clock position so that when it's tightened, it'll be right there.
So here is the final step of the tightening, performing the 90-degree torque to yield sequence. What you're seeing here is actually me doing this for the second time around, because the first time around while filming and trying to rush to get this done because it was starting to take a little bit of a long time, lost my train of thought in the middle and got out of sequence, so I ended up having to get a second set of bolts and doing this again.
At this point, the valve cover is on securely and it's time to install the camshaft bracket, which I have test fitted here. Initially what I did is I tried to release the timing chain tensioner in order to confirm the timing alignment by turning the engine over, then attempted to install the camshaft bracket. However, at this point, it seemed a little too tight and I didn't want to force it over the camshaft bearings. Instead, what I decided to do is back off the tensioner once more, which seemed to give me a little bit of extra room in order to put these on. Looking back at some of the video, I noticed that it was a bit tight coming off, so I don't believe there's an issue here. So right now, I'm going to leave the timing chain loose, take this bracket back off, install the 2 front cylinder head bolts, and begin tightening the bracket. I have the 2 new front cylinder head bolts in place. These are 4 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. Here's my camshaft bracket. I have 2 O-ring seals installed here. And then I have the variant, which is a dowel pin with steel bolts. These are the old bolts. I have a new set. The torque sequence for this particular one, is to start with the dowel pin bolt, torquing that to 3 Newton meters, then going around and torquing all the bolts to 9 Newton meters in the order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I can go ahead and install the camshaft control valves, which get torqued to 35 Newton meters. And these are reverse thread. With everything installed, I went ahead and turned the engine over by hand to take it through 1 full operating cycle, which is 2 turns of the crankshaft, and then went ahead and confirmed that all my timing marks are still in alignment. So now what I'm going to do is release the timing chain tensioner and go ahead and start rolling along, putting all these little parts and pieces back on. Here's my progress so far. I've got the timing cover installed, release the timing chain, put the inspection plug back in. I have a new one of those on the way, just using the old one for now. I have the engine mount installed, the coolant reservoir is in, some of the coolant lines reconnected, this one here, this one here. Got the fuel lines reinstalled. I didn't get this on video, but I did install the vacuum pump as well as the high pressure fuel pump. Just getting all this little stuff buttoned up. As of right now, I have the old PCV installed, but I do have a new one of those on the way as well, which I'll be replacing before this is all finished. I'm leaving the harness off for now because I have a new set of spark plugs for this, and I think this would be a good time to change those. I've gone ahead and blown out the spark plug holes for each cylinder, and now I'm going to go ahead and begin changing the spark plugs. This is the set of plugs I have that are going in. These are the recommended replacement for the APR Stage 2s. Okay, got the plugs out, got the new ones and the old ones here side by side. So what I'm seeing right now is, well, first of all, I went ahead and checked out these new ones. Check the gap on them. So they are coming in at right around 24 thousandths of an inch. So I checked them with a feeler gauge. 24 thousandths fits fine, 25 thousandths doesn't quite fit. And then I went ahead and looked at the new ones. The gap on those is coming in right around 30 thousandths, except for this one, which fell as soon as I took it out. So that one's actually right around 24, 25 thousandths. So looking these two over, the one thing I did notice is, number one, I believe this is going to be a colder plug because that stick out is not quite as far as the one here. But I do see that the contact design is different, and I'm actually hoping that that's not going to be an issue with hooking up these coils. So that's going to be my only concern. After taking a closer look at my coils and both of these plugs, as of right now, I'm thinking that these coils will not be compatible with this style of spark plug. So when looking inside here, inside of the boot, it has this contact spring, which is designed to come down and make contact right there on the spark plug. And there doesn't seem to be anything that will allow clipping in of this style of contact and inserting that. There's no positive lock. So I think what I'm actually going to do is use these old spark plugs. When I inspected them, the actual the electrodes and the bands, they look good. They're not excessively worn. Although they are dirty, these should be good to go. So I think what I'm going to do is adjust the gaps to match the new ones and run these after I degrease them, clean them up. I'd like to use the new ones, but I think throwing those in right before going to the track is a bit risky, so I'm just going to find a compatible replacement and just run these for now. Here's a look at my spark plug adjustment tool. So if you haven't seen one of these, you drop a spark plug in here and then you wind this end down in order to close the gap. Generally what people seem to do is they will insert a feeler gauge to prevent this from closing too far and then set it that way. But the trick is that there is a bit of flex in that ground strap. So what happens is you tighten it down and it springs back. So simply going to 25 thousandths will not do it. This one is actually pretty springy. So with some trial and error, I figured out that by clamping a 20 thousandths gauge in there is what I need in order to get it to work for right around 25 thousandths. So I'm just using these two as like a go, no go check. So 25 doesn't quite fit, and 24 is able to fit in just fine. So I'm going to gap all four of these, and then I think I'm going to take a look inside the cylinders real quick before reinstalling these. Okay, I just finished looking over all of the cylinders internally. They all look really good. They all looked about the same. So I'm just going to show you one for reference because there's nothing really else to be seen besides this one. So right now I have the scope down in the number 2 cylinder just because that piston is at the bottom. And let me move over to the endoscope camera and let you see what's going on. So first thing I noticed is that all these cylinders and the pistons are pretty clean. The way that the video comes out, it actually shows it, makes it look a little bit worse than it actually is. So when we first cycle it on, you can kind of get a broader view of the inside, but the flash or the light, even on the lowest setting, seems to kind of overpower it. And let's move on to the side camera and take a look at the cylinder wall and the valves. And I think one thing you'll notice is just how clean everything is. So right now we're looking towards the intake valves. In the middle there you can see the direct injector, which is also looking nice and clean on the end. And then that's the exhaust side, also looking good. Kind of having trouble right now getting a good view of the cylinder walls. Looks normal to me. I don't see any gouging or excessive wear. So this right now is with 60,000 miles on it. The car is tuned on 93 and that's what I run. I guess this is the result of my fueling and usage with it. I do regular maintenance on it, probably far over maintaining it. I'm following a severe maintenance schedule and also beating on the car pretty hard, so that may all play into it. Okay, now going back together with the re-gapped old spark plugs. Now I get them all started by hand and get them finger tight. The torque for these is going to be 22 foot-pounds. I just wanted to share this real quick. So I don't have torque wrenches that work in Newton meters. So most if not all these specs that I get are in Newton meters. However, I've been doing some quick conversions in order to work with what I have for inch pounds as well as foot pounds. So I just want to show you real quick the easy conversion for going from Newton meters to inch pounds, Newton meters to foot pounds, and then going between foot pounds and inch pounds. So for example, let's take 4 Newton meters and we want to convert this to inch pounds. So all we would have to do is multiply that by 8.85, and this would be our inch pounds value, which I would call 35 in this case. And then for some reason, if we wanted to see what 4 Newton meters is in foot pounds, even though it's probably going to be a very small amount, you would just multiply by 0.7375, and this would be the foot pounds value. So I would call that 3 foot-pounds, and then we could confirm this if we do our 4 Newton meters again times 8.85 to get inch pounds, and then we would divide the inch pounds by 12 to get it into foot pounds, which is the same value that we got before. And then if we wanted to get inch pounds from foot pounds, we would simply multiply by 12, getting us back to our 35.4. All right, getting really close now. At this point, I'm just going to cruise along and kind of wrap this thing up so I can confirm that everything works. Trying to work towards starting the engine and confirming that everything can run, as well as cycling through the oil that's in there right now in order to get any of that little debris that may still be left in there even after cleaning down into the oil pan. At least that's my hope with it anyway. So the car's just going to sit idle for a bit. I want to get that stuff down, and then I can go ahead and do all my maintenance stuff, including the oil change. But for right now, I'm going to go through and button up the engine wire harness, install the ignition coil packs, the intake, and the battery. But even though I need to change my transmission fluid, I'll need to have the battery out in order to change the filter for that, which is fine. That's not a big deal. That only takes a couple minutes to remove that, but I would rather button everything up right now and be able to start the car, run it, confirm everything is good, or find out that something has gone horribly wrong. But yeah, I'm just going to cruise along and then check back once that's ready to go. I suppose it can't hurt to trace the harness routing as I'm going to be hooking things up, so I'm just going to run that through that real quick. Probably not really hooking everything up because it's tough to do some of this with one hand. So starting with the harness coming off the car, it's coming through this loop here. Going to go down the front first, so it's going to hook on right there to this bracket. The low pressure fuel line will clip in right there. Coming down, I'm going to hook up our manifold absolute pressure sensor. Another mount here to slide over. I'm going to leave that loose for now, just in case I need to manipulate it. So I already have coil packs inserted. Coming down here, retainer clip for the harness. It's going to go clip in right there. This is going to be the plug for, there we go. This is going to be the plug for the evap purge valve. There we go. Coming down further, this should be all oil related stuff, so down there. So I'm not going to hook that up right now. It's kind of hard to do that with one hand. Also looks like this clip here locks in. It's going to lock in right there on that ear on the dipstick. So yeah, let's go look at the back side. All right, so coming across, these are grounds for the ignition coils. I'm gonna leave these off for now. So I'll be, of course, plugging in this whole set of coils down like that. Back here, we have the camshaft adjuster plugs going through, 8 of them. And just in case I numbered them, 1 through 8. See, going down the front here, the only thing we have is our 2 plugs for the camshaft adjuster magnets. Right here, actually I'm going to unplug this because it's not plugged in yet, so I don't forget. This is the connector for the blow-off valve. Then the exhaust camshaft sensor connector, which is right there. Next we have the high pressure fuel pump, and that looks to be it. As of right now, I believe I've got everything either back in place or temporarily installed in order to allow me to run the engine to confirm the repair and also to flush through any oil debris, as well as warming up the oil to let it drain out easier. So what I've done is I've got all my harness hooked up. For the temporary stuff, I have the air intake and battery stuff just kind of sitting in here. That will have to come back out in order to swap out the transmission filter. So everything else is good to go though. I did not need to vacuum fill the cooling system because I only drained it from here. So when I dumped it back into the bottle, it came right back up to level. I did, however, put a pressure tester on there and left it on for quite a while at 15 psi just to check for any leaks, which there were none. After hopping in the car, I turned the key on without starting it and was able to find that I did not tighten the high pressure fuel pump line, so spilled fuel on the ground, but just had to tighten that up. Forgot to do that while I was doing the install. But as of right now, I believe it is ready to start, so I'm going to go ahead and give it its first start since the repair.
Unfortunately, my microphone did filter out the engine as noise, but if you could have heard this first startup, the car pretty much sounded like a Subaru Boxer engine. Like, it pretty much sounded like a WRX sitting there idling, which, although it sounded cool, got me pretty worried there for a second. Once I checked things over and took a few moments to think about it, I realized that the most likely cause was that the engine oil had drained down from the cylinder head because of all the disassembly that had gone on. After shutting it off and restarting it a second time, it already sounded much better, which made me think even more that this was all due to low oil pressure inside the timing system during the first startup. I still went on to check things over with VCDS.
So with that first start, there was a distinct misfire in the engine. I didn't hear any engine noise, which was good. It's always a good thing, but now I need to figure out what's going on. So I have VCDS open, and I've gone through and scanned for codes. So already there were codes from today for misfires, and I've gone ahead and cleared them all out. What I'm going to try to do now is bring up some misfire counters and run the car and see if maybe I can isolate the issue. So I'm seeing a few misfires, mostly on cylinder 4. However, the car is running fine as of right now, or at least much better. So I'm wondering if what we were seeing was related to oil pressure working its way through the cylinder head. Also, it's likely that if the ECU is seeing a large amount of misfire from a cylinder, it would just deactivate that cylinder. So it's possible that's why it sounded so bad. However, the car is sounding mostly normal now. I'm thinking it's just the oil pressure working its way back through the valvetrain because I did have everything apart during the repair. All right, I'm going to try one more time. So the car's come up to temperature a little bit, but as of right now, no additional misfires being picked up. And I did scan after the last start, and there were no codes set. So I'm guessing that the few misfires that we did see were related to the cold start, which it's normal for an engine to experience some misfires on cold start. That's probably why the code wasn't even set. Looks like it's within its sensitivity threshold. So I'm going to say we're good. Everything is still looking good out here. Everything sounds normal. No leaks underneath. All right, so as long as I have the computer out, I thought I would test out my new gadget from HPTuners. So this is what I'm hoping to use to gather some additional vehicle data when I go to the track and drive. But also, since I have the capability to read ECUs with this, I thought I would try to scan this vehicle and see what I can pull from it. I would love to see the tune that's in there and start getting familiar with it. I've never tuned any Volkswagen stuff, nothing with this ECU, and I've never worked with HPTuners before, so really just want to check things out. However, what I'm expecting is that I won't be able to read the ECU because I have a tune from APR. This car has both an APR engine tune as well as a transmission tune. So I'm going to hook this up and show you what it does when I scan it. Okay, so first I'll go to gather data or gather info. It looks like it has identified the the engine ECU as well as the transmission. So it says DQ250 TCM. Pretty sure that's the transmission in these. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. And then it looks like ECU completed. And then the TCM should fail. I already ran this previously one time, but last time it failed. So that fails and then displays this message. The tune file you've been supplied is a stock file because this control module is not readable. It is perfectly safe to use. If this module has been previously tuned, you will lose any existing changes. So I'm not really sure if this pertains to the ECU or the TCU. I'm assuming it's gonna be talking about the TCU since it failed. However, I'm not sure. It could be referring to the engine computer and then nothing at all in terms of the TCM or TCM TCU. So I'm going to go ahead and try to save this and then I'll figure out what this means later. After browsing through the file, it looks like the tune which was able to be read but a stock file was supplied for was in fact the ECU tune and nothing was read from the transmission itself. But it's been really interesting just reviewing the way this tune setup is. It's really been overwhelming. There's so many parameters in here, and I'm really not used to HPTuners yet, as well as just this ECU configuration alone. But if anyone's interested, we can go through some of this in a different video. It's just interesting to see some of the parameters that are found in here. Stuff related to like flex fuel and multi-port injection, and there seems to be some parameters related to the transmission, as well as some of the torque model stuff and like places where it looks like the values are set for how much power the car can make. So I thought it's pretty interesting. So if you want to see that in a future video, let me know. Okay, back outside the vehicle now for what should be the easiest part of the video. This is going to be the maintenance part, so I'm going to go ahead and change my oil. I'm going to perform a DSG service, which is the transmission flush, as well as changing the fluid in the differential. I've once again removed the battery and the air intake, which I didn't bolt in before, so it all just lifted out. And now what I'm going to do is change the transmission filter as well as the engine oil filter. Filters are already loose, so I'm just going to pull out the transmission filter here. And I'll get my oil filter as well. Here's my new filter stuff, engine, transmission. Got a gasket for the transmission drain plug, and then this should be for the transfer case. Not sure why I only have one. I believe there's two, but this might be just the drain plug. It's looking really clean in here, which doesn't surprise me. I serviced the transmission, I believe, about 20,000 miles ago, maybe a little less, but we'll see what comes out once we drain it as well. You know, I never really get the small O-rings for this thing right here when I get these filters. I should think about replacing this. I guess I'll get that next time around. All right, engine oil filter going back in. The new one. Actually, I think I'm going to wait to put the transmission filter in because I can see the fluid from the transmission pooled up top. I'm going to see if that goes down when I drain it. If not, I'll suck this out of here. But for now, I'll just put the cover on it to keep any debris out and go ahead and do the rest of the service. This is where I'll be draining out all the fluids. So to start off with the oil, usually I use a vacuum tool to evacuate oil through the dipstick, but since I want to get any stuff on the bottom of the oil pan out, I'm going to go ahead and pull the drain plug for it, which is here. This car has been changed over to the steel oil pan from the plastic one that comes on a factory, so the drain plug is a little different. It's just a regular bolt. The only thing is I don't have a replacement gasket for this one. By the looks of this one, I think I can get at least one more use out of it if I can't find a spare sitting around here. But either way, even if I don't, I'm going to measure this up and get a pack of these for in the future. The next thing is the transmission. So I just need to drain the fluid from here by pulling this plug. Then after this, there's actually a threaded tube in here which needs to come out, which is used for setting the fluid level, but removing that allows all the fluid to drain out. Okay, and the last thing is going to be the transfer case. I think this is also referred to as a bevel box, but I'll be changing the fluid in this as well. I refer to it as a transfer case because it sends power out to the front wheels as well as the rear. Right here should be the fill plug, so I'll be removing that and then draining that right through here. It looks like I only have one replacement plug and gasket, so I'm going to go ahead and replace the drain plug, but I'll be checking these on the bench to see how similar they are. I'm guessing it's the same plug, just need two of them instead of one. But yeah, that way I can have it saved up for the next time. When I'm doing services on the car, I like to use these old gallon jugs in order to collect the oil. That way afterwards I can take a really good look to see what comes out of there, especially if anything settles out on the bottom like metal shavings or clutch material. This way I can get a better idea of what's going on with the car potentially. I also like to use this method for fluids that are going to be going back into the vehicle. For example, this is my washer fluid because I had to remove the reservoir for this repair, so I use a jug, well actually two jugs to collect that. Nothing wrong with that, so it's going back in. And this is one that I use for my coolant. I just changed the water pump on this vehicle very recently, probably less than 1,000 miles ago, so all this coolant was clean, is brand new. So this way I have a clean container to drain that stuff into and then put it back into the vehicle. Okay, here is the drain plug and fill plug for the transfer case. This is the new one side by side, so they're all the same, drain and fill. Here's the part number for that. And let's see. The size of these is 5mm, but there was a bit of a trick to removing the fill plug was not quite straightforward. So initially I was able to reach it with a long 5mm Allen like this with a rounded end, which you will need to access it, but you do need a shorter, you either need a shorter Allen bit or one that's more rigid, because this one flexed so much I couldn't get that loose, and instead of messing around, potentially stripping it, I decided to go another way. I was thinking about going to the store, getting a smaller one of these. So the reason is a straight one won't fit because of the heat shield and the axle that are in the way. So instead what I did is going in with an extension and a long Allen. This is 8mm. I went ahead and removed the heat shield for the axle. This is the heat shield for the downpipe. So it's just 2 of these Allen nuts, and then you can't bend this out of the way because it's cast aluminum. But with that out of the way, I was able to go ahead and get this in there, get that loose, and it's currently draining right now. Okay, here's the rest of the plugs. The transmission plug, that's 14 millimeter Allen. This is the fill tube that sits right on top of that, like that. 8 mil to remove that. That's just finger tight, hand tight, like barely finger tight. Just twists right out, twists right in lightly. This is plastic, pretty fragile. So new gasket for that, part number there. And then here's my oil drain plug. It's an ECS magnetic plug. I already checked the magnet portion of it. Nothing there out of the ordinary, just a little bit of metallic dust that collects on these over time. And considering how long that's been in there since it's been wiped off, it was very good because it was just a tiny little trace amount on the end here. I measured the thread. Measured the thread diameter here, and it is 14 mil. And I actually do have a crush washer for this to replace, so that's all set. And I actually have an entire bag of these just sitting around as spare parts. So here's all the old fluids out of the vehicle. I got the transfer case here, engine oil, and the transmission right here. I've already looked through these, and so far everything looks good. I was able to see the drain plug for the oil, the magnetic drain plug, so that looked good. I can't actually see inside this oil, see through to the bottom because it's too dark. So I'll be taking a closer look at this one when I drain it into the waste bucket. But this one here, I don't know if I can show you on the camera with one hand, but I was shining a light behind this, looking through it. This all looks good. I didn't see any metal in there, anything like that. It's a bit dark though, which, I don't know, for about 20,000 miles, that seems dark maybe, but overall the fluid quality is acceptable. And as far as the transmission, I was able to look through this fluid. So all this stuff looked fine draining out. I was watching it pouring out with a light near it. I didn't see any weird stuff, nothing chunky, or didn't notice any metal. And then I was able to pull these over to the edge and shine a light underneath so I could see if anything was settling out, and didn't see anything. But same deal as the engine oil. When I pour this out, I'll be watching as it pours out into the waste bucket to see if I catch anything. This is the transfer case fluid again from underneath. I was able to check it out like this, but I don't know if you'll be able to see much on the video like this, but yeah, just went all the way around on it, checked it out, looks good. Also, I took a closer look at the fluid here where I took the filter out of the transmission. So that stuff that I saw earlier, it wasn't because it wasn't drained down. It's just some fluid that pulls up top. So I could have put the new filter in and sealed this up, but I'm going to pull this out with my vacuum, not my vacuum cleaner, but a vacuum extractor, and put the new filter back in. All right, it is definitely getting close to the end here. It is time to start filling these fluids. The filters are in, and I think we're good to go, start filling these things up. So let me show you what I've got here. For the transfer case, I have the Volkswagen Oxol gear oil. Following that is my transmission fluid, multi-DCTF from Motul. And my engine oil is going to be the Motul 8100 X Clean. So the engine oil is simple, it just pours in from the top. Can't quite remember the amount. I think it's about 5.5 liters. So I'll start by putting this whole 5-liter jug in and then dial the rest of the level in after that. I have 6 liters of this transmission fluid, which will be filled using a fluid pump. This is the pump right here. And then to fill the transfer case, I'm going to use this pump here. So these are both fluid pumps, just a little bit of different configuration. But in order to fill it up, first I was looking at this hose that attaches to the end here, and unfortunately it is slightly bigger than the fill plug. However, I did find in the same box as this pump this adapter here, and wouldn't you know, it's the same thread that's right there. So I'm going to be able to thread that into the fill plug of the transfer case. This goes on the end of it there, threads on like that, and then the hose goes right here. So you just pump all the fluid right in. And what's cool about this is, so the way these fill is, it's just right up to the fill level happens right at the bottom of the fill plug. The way this thread is cut is kind of triangular, so it starts pouring out when it's full to let you know to stop pumping, and you can just start unthreading this stuff and sealing it back up. This is the adapter for the transmission, so it's still on there from the last time I did this service. And I got my brand new oil fill funnel, which I've been excited to use. Been wanting one of those for a while, just kept forgetting to order one, but finally got it. What I'm doing right now is transferring all of the transmission fluid into this fill pump. And then after that, the process is pretty simple. The fill tube is already installed. Afterwards, I just have to connect this tool to the bottom of the transmission and then pump all of the fluid, which I'm transferring into here, into the transmission. After that, I'll be running the car to get the transmission into a certain temperature range and then draining off the fluid level in order to set it. So at this point, all of that fluid has been transferred into the transmission, and it's ready to set the level by warming the transmission up to the appropriate range, which begins at 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees Celsius. All right, so now what I'm going to do is hop on VCDS and start warming up the vehicle. Once it reaches 95 degrees, I'll be back down here draining this off to set the level, and then going ahead and installing my plug back on. And at that point, we should be finished. All right, back in the car now on VCDS for auto trans measured values. I brought up ATF temperature. Now gonna wait for this to reach 35 degrees C and then start setting that level. Okay, all the work on the front drivetrain is now good to go. I've made some good progress in this video. However, the car is far from finished because in the next video, I'll be working on my racing line brakes, getting them ready for the racetrack, as well as doing even more maintenance, and I'll be opening up my Haldex unit and replacing the clutches in order to try to fix my four-wheel drive system. So if you've made it to this point, I want to say thank you for sticking around. This video was pretty hard to make. It was touch and go for a lot of the way. Every time I would turn on the camera, I would just forget what to say, and lots of takes were done. There were screw ups because I was trying to focus on making the video and working on the car. So everything took 2-3 times as long, and some things had to be done and redone, like the cylinder head cover bolts, which actually the first time around when I was torquing them, I accidentally kind of got lost in my, lost my train of thought and didn't follow the sequence. So I ended up having to do those 2 times. But all in all, it's all said and done, and I'm glad I was able to explore this stuff and share it with other people that might be interested. So at this point, I do have one ask for you. That is, if you could consider subscribing to the channel. I would like to work towards getting this channel monetized in order to support these kind of projects, both in the garage and maybe even on the track, if it ever got to that point. If you liked the video, leave a like, of course, and if you didn't like it, let me know. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you in the next video, which I'm about to start recording right now.